Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. If you do like the programming you see here and the artists and musicians I visit with, be sure and hit the like button below and also subscribe to the channel. Rick Brown is an American singer who currently lives in Bangkok, Thailand. Rick's musical journey began as the lead singer of The Misunderstood. The band had its origins in California in 1963 as the surf band The Blue Notes. In 1965, the band's name was changed to The Misunderstood after honing an early psychedelic sound. After John Ravenscroft, aka John Peel, discovered the band playing live, he ended up managing and relocating the unit to London, England in 1966. Although only together for a short time, having split up in 1967, the band left it in its wake a series of singles, and in more recent years, there have been several compilation albums released. The Misunderstood was very influential and even predated the psychedelic era of the 1960s. Since those heady days, the band has become quite the cult fan favorite, even to this day. Post music, Rick spent time in India, became a Vedantist, discovered a ruby mine, received a degree as a gemologist, and is currently designer at Astral Gemstone Talismans. Welcome, Rick. Take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Florida, and went to grade school in Florida, and went to junior high school in New Mexico, and then went to high school in California.
Okay. Well, early on, backing up a little bit, do you remember hearing music in the household when you were growing up?
Well, I remember, I used to follow all the music scene that was popular. I mean, as far back as I can remember, Chubby Checker and
Okay. Okay.
all the, I followed all that stuff.
Okay. How about,
Then early on, when I got to California, that's when the Beatles came out.
yeah.
When the Beatles came out, that's when it became obvious that human beings can do this. You
Yes.
know,
Yes. Right. Well, were either one of your
that was
parents?
me.
Yeah. I was
Pardon?
going to say, were either one of your parents musically inclined at all?
My dad had a band, and I swear to God, he had the most ridiculous name.
Okay.
He was a singer in a band when he was
Yeah.
in college. It was
Okay.
called Dick Brown and his Men of Note.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna have to look that up. Dick
I don't know
Brown
if
and
it was like he was just in high school or college, but he was the singer of a band, and it was like that, that I don't know, big band style, like Tommy Dorsey. I don't know how I never heard anything. I don't think they even had recording back then, or
okay. Okay.
but
All right.
they hadn't discovered this the sound or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were playing that they were all playing. It was back in the days of you had like Frank Sinatra and all these guys.
Right. All those crooners and everything. Well, how
Yeah,
about can you remember some of the early 45s or albums that you bought?
I never bought much music.
Okay.
I remember I never really did buy much music. I heard it on the radio or yeah, I
Okay.
didn't buy much music, but later on when I was in high school, I bought some music, and it was mostly Yardbirds and
Oh, all right.
Animals, them, and but even then, you didn't really buy. Yeah, you would buy a single. You wouldn't buy an
Yeah.
album. Who's
Right.
got money for a freaking album, man?
I was talking to somebody.
When you're a kid in high school, excuse
Yeah.
me.
I was talking to somebody the other day about it was a UK musician. Do you remember on the back of cereal boxes where they would have 45s? Do you remember that?
I think so. Yeah.
It was like a promo, and it was and you had to cut it out, from the back of it had the grooves in it. It would actually play, but it was like hard to get it like even because it was kind of floppy, like that.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Right, yeah, right, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how about some other bands? You mentioned
But I didn't like American bands. I remember
okay.
when the Beatles came out, I'm like, okay, this is
Yes,
cool.
yes, right,
But a little too tight.
right.
And then the Stones came out, and I'm like, okay, well, this is a little too loose.
Okay, right.
And then the Kinks came out with like the early stuff,
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh man, this is nectar.
that's right.
Buzz
Yes.
guitar, this riff rock that nobody had ever heard of before. And then the Yardbirds like perfected it
Right.
with like
Yeah.
shapes of when I heard
Oh,
Mr. You're
shapes of things. Yeah.
when I
Right.
heard Mr. You're a better man than I.
Yes.
and
Yes.
solo and the words. I mean, it was a song that had a meaning. It wasn't just boy meets girl dumbassery, you know.
Right. 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 Right.
I'm so
Exactly.
sick of that, you know.
Yeah.
I'm so
And
sick of
more.
that. I can't even hear that kind of music. It's like
Right.
if you
More.
listen to
More.
the lyrics, it's either pathetic or it's
Right.
idiotic, you know.
Right.
There's nothing
More.
intellectual at all. You know, boy meets girl. I mean, Dick and Mole in and out, in and out. I mean, what a genius, you know.
Right. Right. And overuse the word
Even
love.
a pig can do that. Even a pig can do that.
Right, right. Overuse the word love. Yeah, too many times. Yeah, I read too in one of the interviews and that you couldn't stand the Grateful Dead, and I'm with you there.
I just don't like
Yeah,
the
I've never
kind of.
gotten into them. I've never gotten into the Grateful Dead. Never got into
Well,
them.
I didn't like any of the San Francisco
Yeah,
bands because I
yeah,
had just been in America. I
right.
mean, I'd been in England in
Okay.
'66.
Yeah,
And this is so so in 60 in England there was the mod scene
right,
and
right,
the rocker scene. And the mods were cool, man. They had style and psychedelic was even cool, you know?
right.
Everything was stylish. And in America they were just a bunch of everybody was like a bunch of hillbilly. Like you take a hillbilly and cross him with a gypsy.
Yes, that's a good way to put
And
it.
nobody had any class
Yeah,
at all,
yeah.
you know?
You know, and
Nobody
another
had
thing
any
that
style. Everybody was moronic, you
right,
know. And then when I ran away from the army after I'd
right.
been in England the year before,
Yeah,
so I'm here. I'm in the Golden Gate Park, and I'm a
yeah,
fugitive, and I'm on the
yeah.
run. And I'm trying to keep low profile. And there's this summer of there's this loving, you know. And there's the Grateful Dead, and there's jazz, and I'm sitting there thinking. And they all sounded like really low volume and rinky dink, and they all had
Yeah.
that kind of a country
Oh, I
twang.
know. They
It
did.
was,
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, this is unbearable.
Yeah.
I was thinking if the misunderstood was up there right now, these people
Yeah.
would blow their minds. You know, they would
Yeah.
blow their minds.
You know.
But
See, I'm an Anglophile myself as far as, music. Majority of what I collect is British, UK music. So I'm with you there. I think they have a better sense of melody. I think the melody is what grabs me. If a song doesn't have that, I don't have time for it,
well, you
And I
know,
think
they have World War in their background.
yeah, right,
They don't
right,
have any cowboys and Indians.
right, right.
They don't have any, they don't have any of this dumbassery, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, but they had a hard situation. So they weren't like
That's
pussy.
right.
The
That's right.
Americans,
And
oh, pussy.
yeah,
Americans' biggest problem is they have no
right,
problem. I
right.
swear to
And
God,
we
Americans'
have, I'll
biggest
tell you,
problem is they have no problem.
what you said is very true. We have too many distractions over here. And I think England and UK, I talked to a musician about this. They had a hard life, like after the war, and the only thing the only outlet they had was the music, So that's why they became so good,
No, and the
Uh,
misunderstood for we first were in London, we stayed in
yeah,
a place. When I got there, these guys were in a basement in a place
yeah.
called Wandsworth, and they
Ah,
were
okay.
curious that
Well,
part of it was still bombed out.
yes. Oh,
I
there you
mean,
go. There you go. Right, right. And some of the
so I mean,
kids, after the war would play.
this is an American pussies worried about the color of toothpaste.
Right, exactly. Hey,
Yeah,
I'm with you.
and
I
people in
sh
America have gotten so
Yeah,
stupid.
yeah,
They don't have any philosophy. They don't have
right,
any psychology. They're just like on the bodily level, but to
right.
such a degree that they're
On
just
the
becoming
surface, on the surface,
people are
everything.
being manipulated one way and the other. And I'm like,
Yeah,
man, I'm just watching this manipulation
right,
of all
right.
this stuff. And I'm like,
We are the
I saw this back in '67 when there was. I asked my
yeah,
dad, I said, why don't they have an election in Vietnam? He said,
right,
because the North would win. And I go, oh, well, God
right.
forbid somebody should win an election.
See, right, right. See, yeah, I
I gotta
think
go kill these
we're
people so they
right.
don't have an election.
Yeah, we're the most brainwashed country around of them
And
all, I think.
then they have what's the
Yeah,
philosophy of this Vietnam War?
yeah.
Well, search and destroy. Oh
Right.
man, with friends like America, who needs enemies?
Who needs enemies? There you go. There you go. We'll talk about the origins of the misunderstood, backing up a little bit.
High
Uh,
school.
okay. Who
We were
came
the
up with
surfer
the
guys.
who came up with the name?
This lady was became our manager, and we were somehow or other we got mistaken for a British band.
Okay.
He recruited us in Riverside, and we
I,
actually played some gigs outside of Riverside, and we were like presented as a British band. We played along, yeah,
yeah, I
and
can
we were.
see why. I can see why. Yeah.
And so then we got kind of popular, and people were like, so then it came in the newspaper. And so the lady who wanted to manage us, she said, you should change your name to the Misunderstoods. you know.
Okay. Okay.
And we said, how about just take off the S and misunderstood? And
Yeah.
that was based on that, but everybody loved it. Like we fooled everybody, you know.
Right. 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 Well, how did you come into the orbit of John Peel?
And the funny thing was that we fooled everybody into thinking we were British, and then we
Yeah.
ended up being the only band that became British.
That's right. How ironic that was, right? Well, how did you come in the orbit of John Peel, who went by John Ravenscroft back then?
He was the big radio station in that area was
Okay.
KMEN,
Okay.
and he was the DJ on KMEN that was
Okay.
British. He
Okay.
was young British, and he had this British accent, and he was a Beatles expert, and he was from Liverpool, even, you know.
Liverpool, right.
And so
Right.
and he was not only that, but he was phenomenally good. I mean, this guy was phenomenally good on the radio. I mean, he was just he turned out to be one of the world's most famous DJs ever, you know.
Right. Right. He got his start. He got his start in Oklahoma City,
Yeah.
I believe. I believe it
That
was.
wasn't really, you know, like he did it, but like in Riverside, is all of a sudden that's when the Beatles were big, and he was like, okay, I'll tell you all about it, you know.
Right.
But
Right.
he was just really good at talk. He could
Yes.
talk on the radio, and you could still listen to any of his old shows. My God, this guy's talent, pure
Yes.
talent, you know. And
Yes.
so he saw us play at a shopping mall, you know.
Okay.
Battle of the Bands, and he didn't even know who we were, and he saw us play, and we had Glenn. I mean, if you got, I remember when Glenn joined
Uh-huh.
the steel guitar. I mean, oh man, this is ridiculous, you know. I remember years later in like 2000s, like the editor of Rolling Stone, he said, with Glenn Ross Campbell was like we had our own Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page rolled into one, you know.
Right. Right. And that name sounds British too, with the two names like that, Glenn Ross. That sounds very British.
And he was a character. He was like,
Yeah.
his mother was like a psychic or something, and you know, he
Yeah.
lived. And when we first met him, we were right out of high school, so you couldn't have long hair. You just couldn't, you know. And so, but he had longer hair than anybody in the whole world. He
Yeah.
had hair down to here, you know. And we're like, how and when did this happen? This high school kid gets a hair like that, you know,
Yeah.
because he
Yeah.
was homeschooled by this weird mother, and so he had really long hair, and he'd been a professional on the steel guitar since 12 years old, you know. And so we were like, oh my God, all of a sudden we were like, a real professional joined the band who was like so much better than everybody else, because nobody ever heard a steel guitar played with fuzzbox and stuff. I mean, nobody
Right.
ever, you know, it was always Hawaiian music, but this was like all of a sudden, my God, this guy was like, you know, he was like so good, and there was nothing he couldn't do. And then he had the volume pedal and the fuzzbox. And, oh my God, it was just crazy. And he was super fun to play with, super funny, because he really looked wild on stage. And he made
Yeah.
clothes. You know?
Yeah. Well, you guys playing live, you really honed your chops.
Well, we in California we did. Then we went to
Yeah.
England. He told us to go to England. He said, in England they'll love you. And
Yeah.
we're like,
Well,
here we are in LA. Go to any
was it,
record store.
I wanted to
Any
ask you about
record.
that. I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you about that where he convinced you guys to go to England. Were all the band members on board with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody was up for that. Okay. Okay.
Well, we had played some gigs, you know, and since we started playing with Glenn, all of a sudden became really a special band. We were like, you know, there was nothing like it, you know.
Yeah.
And so then he got a gig for us at Pandora's Box, which is a club in Hollywood. That was like this really way out club on Sunset, you know. And he got us a gig in there. I don't know how he did it. And we played the place, and nobody knew who we were. We just absolutely blew their minds, because we did the thing with the feedback and leaving the stage, and all the lights in the back of the amps were flashing. It was plugged into the extension amp output. Glenn did it, you know.
Right. Right.
He would solder. He took a guitar. He'd take a tail light, a motorcycle tail light at that time, you know, and he would solder it to a guitar jack, and he would plug it into the extension amp output. And he would play his guitar, and it would glow exactly at what he played, and it was just exact visual music.
Right, right,
We started
right.
doing this on stage with the bass and the two guitars. We had three lights, and so this was all. And we would leave the stage with all the guitars feeding back against the amps, and nobody was on stage with the drummer, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm out in the audience with John, and everybody just looking at the stage with their mouths hanging open. It was like nobody knew if they liked it or what, you know. And it was like and John said, look at everybody. He says, you know, Ricky, you got to be in England. You got to go to England. They're going to love you in England. Because we go to all these record companies with him, and they're all like, hey, can you play what's on the radio? And I'm like, oh, man.
Right, right. Well, you guys were well received across the pond too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What did you? Were there any culture shocks immediately when you got over there? Anything that really stood out to you that was
Yeah, it was like all of a sudden, it was not just a culture shock, it was like culture. Like
okay?
I grew up in a world where there was no culture. And
Yeah,
now I'm
yeah,
looking at culture and like, God, I don't
right.
care. But I mean that culture is nothing compared to Asia. Asia is so exotic, and you've got a whole society of people who believe in reincarnation, a whole society of people who believe in karma, a whole society of people that aren't dumbasses. And I'm telling you, in the West, it's like even England. They're
Yeah,
just dumb as a rock, those people, you know? The general people, they just have no concept. There's something life after death, or even that there's a soul in the body, or even there that they're a soul.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
over here, even our taxi driver knows that, you know?
Right, right. Well, let me
They
ask you about
don't have to
when.
talk about it. They don't have to talk about it to know it. They just know it.
Yeah,
They're born knowing it over here, you know?
right, right. Exactly. More
That's why
spiritual.
that's why I live in Asia, because I can't live in a
Yeah,
society of
right,
one life.
right,
One
right.
life, what it
Yeah,
is, you know?
exactly. Well, much more spiritual over there. Well, you guys, how soon after you went over to England did Greg leave the band?
They went over before I did. They went, on the boat. And I had to go into Army physical, so I had to wait for like a few weeks to go to the physical for Army draft, you know. And so I go in there, and it's like you entered into the world of a nightmare, you know. It's just like all of a sudden you're cattle, you know.
Right.
So I get to do this thing, and now I can go. And so I got my mom and dad bought me a ticket. And back then it was like $100 to go fly to England.
Outrageous. Yeah, yeah.
And so I go over there, and they pick me up at the airport, and they have a manager. His name is Nigel Thomas, and they're just waiting for me to get there because they couldn't do anything until I got there. I was a singer, and so when we got there, he arranged a few gigs for us. One was a gig we played at a club called Knuckles, which is
Okay.
in Soho, and it was run by Viv Prince of all people. And I didn't have any idea who the pretty things were, you know.
Right, right, right,
Think
right.
of Viv Prince, but all of a sudden I'm friends with the guy. The first time I ever took acid was with him, you know.
Okay.
And we
Yeah,
weren't sitting around being loons. We were reading the
right.
Tibetan Book of the Dead. It was the craziest thing. It was like all of a sudden my first introduction to LSD was the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and Viv Prince is
Yeah,
looking at it with. You know?
yeah, yeah,
When he was
yeah.
talking about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, they were like, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, man. It's like we're not this body. That's
Right,
exactly what everybody was talking about. That was like there was a book called The Psychedelic Experience by
right,
Timothy Leary that was
right.
based on the book, the Tibetan
That's
Book
right.
of. And
That's right.
that's what we were, and so right away it became a religious thing. Straight away it became a religious thing, for me.
Yeah, yes, yes. I want to ask you about Alan Watts. Are you a follower of his? Were you a follower of?
I know I don't really
Yeah,
follow him, but I know
yeah,
who he is.
yeah, yeah. He had passed away a few years ago. I saw some of his videos and his teachings on YouTube. Very, very interesting. Well,
Right, yeah.
but Greg did leave the band, and Tony Hill replaced him. Yeah,
Well, Greg I didn't know it, but he was getting drafted too, and so yeah, he decided he was going to go back before he got drafted and join the Navy so he could at least stay away from Vietnam or something like that, which is, I can't really argue him because that's what he did, and it worked. And so but the fact that he did leave made it possible to get Tony Hill in there, who on his own was good enough to be the lead instrument,
right.
he
What
was a
did
British, he
what
was a
had
British.
Tony? What had Tony? Yeah, what had he done previously, Tony?
He had been in a band called The Answers, a British
Okay,
band
okay,
called The Answers. And Glenn, before he joined The Misunderstood, was in a band called The Answers in America,
oh, okay.
Really strange. So
That is.
Tony, I met Tony somewhere, and we were losing Greg, and Tony, was a guitar player, a really good guitar player. And he tried out for the band, and when Greg was still there, and Greg showed him a few songs, he was like 10 times better than Greg. He was like so much better. He was
Yeah,
all of a sudden on the level of Tony, on the level of Glenn,
yeah,
And so
yeah.
Glenn was all of a sudden relieved of the duty of rhythm,
Right, right,
He
right.
could just make sound effects and do all kinds of crazy stuff because Tony was could be a lead rhythm guitar player. He was like so good at it.
Yeah,
And not just that, but acoustic guitar and finger picking and everything he was good at. And
right,
so
right.
he and I we started living together.
Okay.
We were all living together at first. And that was really a good time because that's when we really could get some stuff together. That's when we started doing our own stuff.
Right.
Stopped playing Yardbirds, stopped playing blues. Now we're doing psychedelic, you know?
Right.
And that's when we came up with Children of the Sun, and I Can Take You to the Sun, and and
Yeah.
Find the
Yeah.
Hidden Door. Tony and I came up with all those things. And I came up
Yeah.
with the and the band they came up with their own parts. We'd like to introduce it to that. We were all living together, so there's no getting away from it, you know.
Right. Right.
You're gonna be in a band, you should all live together, you know.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that. Yeah. You became like a family. I mean, that's what I hear, you know. I mean, you guys are around each other.
There's an age kind of age for that, you know, because we were refugees in this foreign country and nobody had any money and we were in this one thing and all the instruments were set up and what else are you going to do? It's like we hadn't played for weeks, you know, or a month.
Yeah.
And so it was like so we played this gig at Knuckles where I met Prince and his band. He was now in a band called Bunch of Fives with Mick Wayne on lead guitar, who was a really good guitar player. And he ended up with a band called Junior's Eyes. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Oh, yes, I've heard of them. Yes, yes.
That was Mick Wayne on guitar, and he and I became really good friends. And Viv Prince, and you know we were getting stoned all the time and hanging out, and so when I started hanging out, living with Tony, then he and I were hanging out. And his scene was, even though we were a rock band, his scene was like the folk scene. So it was like, you know, that kind of Bert Yance type of scene, you know.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I was kind of hanging out with him, even though we were into, you know, our own way a rock band, and that's why that we put that ending on "I Can Take You to the Sun," that kind of folksy ending, you know, where it turns rock song into a folk song,
right, right,
purpose, you know.
Right, exactly. Well, as mentioned earlier, you guys did go down well playing live in London. Any other live shows that you remember?
Well, we did it meet in England.
Yeah.
When we played Knuckles, then after that we had a gig at the right outside of London in a socialite's place, together with Alexis Corner.
Yes, an icon.
Alexis Corner, who turns out is like the father of the blues in England. Right. It's like, you want to make it in England, you need this guy. And we all of a sudden we were on the bill with him, you know.
Yeah.
And so we played, and then he played, and then he asked us to come up on stage, and we all played together, turned our backs on the audience. Bunch of prep school pricks that couldn't I was like, I'm up there with Alexis Corner, and I didn't even know who he was, really, you know.
Yeah.
Later, we had me come to his house, and he and I played music, just the two of us.
Right.
He was a grown-up guy with kids and wife and everything. I was like, Jesus, he's smoking pot, smoking hash, you know.
Yeah.
I'm like 19 years old. Here's this 38-year-old guy who's a blues master, and he's got his guitar and I got my harmonica, and his two kids are there and his wife, and I'm like, this is amazing.
Wow, I haven't heard that story. Well, you know, and also another icon, blues icon that passed away not long ago, John Mayall.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah. I never met John Mayall, but I sure did know a lot of people that did, you know.
Yeah.
And I did follow his music, and it wasn't for lack of trying, you know. I actually never tried to meet anybody, you know.
Right.
I was just going with the flow, you know.
Right.
Well, like the second night we were there, I got taken by this one guy. I met some guy. He's a writer for some newspaper, for some magazine. You know? He said, "Oh, tonight I'm going to take you to see the Who." You know.
Yeah.
So I've been like the second or third night I was in London. He just took me, you know, and the two of us went to this place called the Starlight Ballroom.
Okay, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Got us in there, right in the front. You know, nobody's sitting down, everybody's standing up. We're right there in the front, man, with the Who. And I'm like, couldn't believe my eyes. It was like, these guys are 1,000 times better than American bands. 1,000 times.
Right.
They had a sound that was 10 times bigger.
Yeah.
Times more exciting. They were so much better on stage and cooler, you know. Then I go back to the American. I'm just looking at these guys in Golden Gate, and I'm like, what a bunch of hillbillies. This is ridiculous. And now those kind of people are turning against the hillbillies, even though they are hillbillies. I couldn't believe it.
They are. Well,
there was a band called Grateful Dead had some guy in there called Pigpen.
Pigpen, yes.
Yeah. You guys are some really class acts, man. You know, like,
right.
There was no style. There was no. Everybody was a slob. Everybody was a slob.
Yeah, they appealed to somebody. You know, they appealed to somebody. I don't understand it.
They appealed to American hippies.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I can't. And they might have appealed to me if I hadn't been in England.
Right.
But I grew up with mod scene where there was
Yeah.
style, and cool, and hairstyles, and you had this riff rock and this kind of everything was pretty cool. And then I get back to this country scene
Yeah.
in Golden Gate Park. But there was one thing that happened when I was in Golden Gate Park, and that was I'd been there a few weeks already, maybe a couple of weeks. I'd been on the run. So I was staying with some friends on Haight Street in a place called the Crystal Palace. And I had been telling them about this guy, Jimi Hendrix. And they had no idea who was Jimi Hendrix. Nothing had ever been released. Nobody had ever heard of him. So I was, because our bass player had become friends with them. So I was like, think you won't believe this. And so all of a sudden I was hearing his music, live. I was hearing it through the window. And we went down and followed, and we get to this place, and here's a flatbed truck. I don't know how many people were there, because when I got there, there wasn't hardly anybody. There was a flatbed truck with a generator, and Jimi Hendrix is up there, and he's with his bass player and his drummer doing their whole first set, which is the Hendrix Are You Experience, the whole thing live right there in front of everyone. If there was announced, I didn't know. I mean, all of a sudden I'm hearing this music. This is impossible.
Yeah.
And I watched the whole thing, and then I went up to Jimmy after it was over, and hardly anybody talked to him because he was putting away his guitar and just standing on the side of that thing. There's just a truck. Didn't nobody who he was. He wasn't famous yet. And so I said, "Hey man," I told him who I was. Oh, he knew all about it. He knew all about it because he had friends with our bass player.
Oh, was he? Was he? Oh, that's a nice story there too.
I remember thinking, because I remember thinking before I was at the Golden Gate Park, I was watching this love, whatever they call it, all the rock bands there, the Grateful Dead, everybody was there. I was thinking, oh God, if the Misunderstood was up there, these people wouldn't believe their eyes,
Yeah.
And then here Hendrix does that. And he's like 10 times better than us already,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how was
but I saw it with my own eyes. It didn't really do him much good, did it?
Right, right. Well, how was John's brother Alan instrumental in getting the band signed with Fontana?
Well, all I know about it is what I've read about it, because I have never met the guy. That all happened before I got there. I never ever met Alan Ravenscroft or his mother.
Okay. Okay.
But I sure knew John well, and I lived with John in America, and I also lived with John in London on my way back to India.
Right.
On my way to India, I stayed with John. And Jeff Beck. I stayed with Jeff Beck too.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, any experiences you can recount with Jeff?
Well, I had no idea that was going to be the case, because when the band broke up, I left before because I had to go back to try to get out of the army. They thought I was going to be able to get out.
Okay.
They thought I was just going to go over there, give this paper saying this guy's under contract in a foreign country and he can't be in your war, and I was just going to come straight back and be in the band,
Yeah. Yeah.
And they, I get to the draft board, and there's some black guy. Hey man, this shit ain't even American.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It didn't fly well.
All of a sudden, I was just caught up in this nightmare of prisoner, army, and then fugitive, and and then on to India.
Yeah, well, I want to get up to that, but prior to that, Dick. Oh, go ahead. Oh,
when I got on my way back to India, on my way to India, I stopped again in London to see what had happened.
Okay.
I didn't know because the band was still together when I left.
Yeah.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because of the back thing. So when we were together before the band broke, before I got drafted, this guy David Swainson had become an investor in our band, British rich guy, and he had this guy Peter Saunders who brought him in, and we got rid of Nigel, who was a deadbeat. And so Peter Swainson had a lot of money, and so all of a sudden we had a whole Marshall amps. We had like 3, Marshall stack for Tony, Marshall stack for Glenn, the Marshall stack for the 3. I mean, nobody had Marshall stacks, man. We had a whole Marshall stack. And this guy, Peter Saunders, was our road manager, and he's the one who arranged this. He was taking care of that equipment, And so when the band broke, when I got back there, I went to see Peter Saunders, who was our old road manager. And he was in a situation where he was renting out our gear to Jeff Beck Group,
Okay. Oh,
and he had Jeff Beck staying in a flat that he was paying for.
Okay.
I should go and stay with Jeff, And I'm like, yeah, man. So I get over there, and Jeff's like, totally cool, man, totally cool. And we, I stayed with him for a couple of weeks, and we went he took me he'd even go fuck some girl. He'd take me with him,
Yeah.
I wouldn't, but I mean, he would take me to the house, and I'd wait upstairs, and
Right.
How
Well,
many guys? I'm gonna go fuck my girlfriend, man. You want to go?
yeah, you wait for me. Yeah, right. Well,
So,
how was he as a personally getting to know
oh, he
him?
was, because I wasn't in a situation of being a band with him. He knew I was on the way to India, and he
Right.
knew I'd been misunderstood,
Okay.
but I wasn't in a band with him, and I wasn't even being a lead singer because he really liked me. He really did like me, and we never had a slightest problem.
Yeah. Well, going back to the misunderstood, Dick Leahy would produce the band's London sessions. Do you recall?
Oh,
Oh, what?
oh yeah, yeah, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yes,
That's right.
yes, yes.
Dick Blake.
Do you recall?
Yeah.
Do you recall the recording sessions?
Well, the first one was done in IBC, and then a
Okay.
couple of other ones were done at the Philips studio.
Okay. Okay.
I remember them. Yeah, I
Okay.
remember those two.
Which studio did you prefer?
Oh, the Philips was the
Okay.
best studio in London.
Okay. Okay.
It was totally killer.
Yeah. Yeah. Were there
It was
any
the best.
nerves being in the studio, or were you guys pretty relaxed? Yeah.
We just played live.
Yeah.
We just played
Yeah.
live. We always recorded live.
Okay. Okay. Not many overdubs or retakes or anything like that. Okay, pretty much. Organic. I like that.
Yeah, playing
Well,
live.
yeah, yeah. Well, playing live, you guys were doing, what you kind of mentioned earlier, the light show, before Pink Floyd, even before Pink Floyd would. And
Well,
there were
you
guys
got
there.
live, you got defects, and you've got
Yeah, you got the feedback. Yeah,
that become qualities even.
right,
Like,
right.
I remember Hendrix was saying these people they even copy his mistakes.
Yeah, right. They had even Pink Floyd members.
Is it a mistake or not?
Right. Even their members were in the audience, watching you guys. Yeah, picking up some helpful hints. Yeah, yeah, yes,
I think that thing where we left the stage with the feedback going,
yeah, right.
that really blew people's minds because I went out in the audience. This is at the Marquee Club.
Oh,
I went out
Marquis.
in the
Yeah,
audience, I look back and I'm looking at everybody's looking at the stage. The
right,
lights are going and there's nobody there. It's just a drummer. And
right.
I remember, good Lord, this is amazing. And everybody, no, I was standing next to people didn't even see me. They were,
Yeah,
I'm the singer of the band they're watching, and I'm standing right next to them, and they don't even know it.
they don't know it.
That's how ridiculous it was.
Yeah. Well, that was you mentioned the Marquis. That was the place to get a residency back then. That if you did that, then you were happening. You were really happening.
I think they snuck us in there as the surprise band because we didn't have a work permit.
Okay.
And so getting us to play anywhere was going to be tricky. And so getting us in the Marquee, I forget, somebody told me who we played. I think it was played with the Graham Bond organization or somebody else. So we were the middle band, but we were every Friday or so, they used to have a surprise band. So they slipped us in there. But man, nobody was ready for us. We were like, because Glenn already was like so ridiculously good. And then plus there's lights and feedback and nobody's
Yeah.
on stage.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
Oh yeah, I imagine so. Yeah.
We were
Well,
the only American bands. Like we were in California. There's a million bands. Who cares?
right,
We're in,
right.
you guys are the only ones here, man. Like we got a
Yeah.
record deal with the biggest record company in town.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah. Well, the UK, the fans they like American, artists too. Jimmy, moved over there and made it really big. So they
He did
like that.
exactly the same
Yeah,
thing. He did
yeah,
exactly. He got a
right.
British, like we got a British guy to join our band, so we were an international band like he was. He
Yep,
got two British guys to join with him. And
yep.
there's nothing I can say about Jimi Hendrix except I've never seen anything live so mind blowing without any special effects.
Right.
But I remember thinking when I saw him to play the second time, I remember
Yeah.
thinking, this guy's going to have a really hard time keeping that up. That is
Right.
really enthusiasm that you can't maintain, and he's going to start hating it. And I don't know how long he's going to be able to keep that up. And sure
Right.
enough, how did he? 5 years? He was like 5 years.
Yeah. He burned out. He was one of those that he did.
Remember Crosstown Traffic? That song
Yeah.
Crosstown
Yeah.
Traffic.
Right. Right.
That's such a great song. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Nothing like it. No.
Yeah,
Well,
remember that one that kind of it was a B-side, or obscure B-side called Highway Child. Remember that Highway Child?
oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Highway Child. Oh yeah.
Fantastic songs and I mean the guitar sound he used to get was like everybody
Yeah.
was like, Lord.
And of course, I like his hits too. All along the Watchtower.
Yeah,
Great,
sure.
great rendition of that one. Well, you mentioned a couple of these tracks before. I have the compilation Before the Dream Faded. I have that one. And you mentioned Children of the Sun, one of my favorites, and I Can Take You to the Sun. You guys were you guys
My
were
mind.
obsessed. You guys were obsessed with the sun. Yeah.
No,
And
we were obsessed with getting beyond bodily consciousness
right.
to realize that you yourself are. It's not I hand, it's my hand.
Yes, yes. Like I do, like I
So the
do.
sun represented the
Right,
truth of what after you before you were born and after you die, what is the truth? That's the same truth that there is now.
right, right. Exactly. Good point. Like I Do is another one that I liked.
That
Was
was
that
before
it?
Glenn. That was before Glenn was in the band.
Okay, that was yeah. It
Way
sounds
back to high school
yeah,
stuff.
that sounded. And then I cried my eyes out. I like the organ.
Really, really. Well, some people like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's more
I find it
poppy.
embarrassing, but I mean, some people I
You find it.
no, I find it embarrassing because the stuff that we ended up doing at the end in
Yeah,
England,
it's nothing like that. Yeah.
the stuff that made it all worthwhile. If it wasn't for that stuff we did in England with Tony, nobody would care about any of it, or
Right,
even know.
right,
It would never
right,
even been released. Because
right.
that stuff we did in England with Tony, those 7 songs, they were like,
Yeah,
I would put them up against anybody. I put them
yeah,
against the best 7 Yardbirds. I'm not saying they're better. I'm just saying I would put them up there with the 7 best Yardbird songs. Those ones we did in UK, that man, they were good. I don't know how we even did it. I can't even. You couldn't even reproduce it.
right, right.
I tried to
Well,
reproduce it. I went back in the '80s when Glenn tried to reproduce it, and I thought, man, we could do it better than we did back then. Man, no, we couldn't even come close.
no, no, no. That was a one time. Once in a
That was
once in a
impossible.
lifetime. Once in a lifetime. Yeah.
That was
Well, there were problems with the band's visas and work permits.
right. I wasn't paying any attention.
Yeah.
I remember when I got to England, I get to the immigration, the guy said, "Where's your visa?" Oh, what's a visa?
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
high
Yeah.
school kid. How am I supposed to know what that means?
Yeah. It's like I've got a MasterCard. Will you take that? I don't have a
Oh, there was
visa.
no MasterCard back
I know.
then.
I know. I'm just being facetious.
Visa.
I'm just being facetious. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Kids
the
are
band.
stupid, but
Yeah.
it's fun. It's funny. It's funny.
Yeah. 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 I know that a lot of bands go through that or have gone through
Kids
that.
weren't stupid. It wouldn't be so funny.
Right. There you go. You can laugh about it now, right? Not at the time. Yeah. Yeah. As they say. Well, the band did split in '67, right? Is that yeah. So
We
here
were
they
forced to break up because I got drafted.
right, right. Well, tell
Lots
tell
of,
that story. Tell that story about being drafted. Now you can go
well,
into that.
I got a letter, to our manager. I got a letter and I showed it to our manager in London. My dad said, "You got drafted. You're going to be indicted if you don't come back." And so the managers, they had a meeting. Oh, we should make a legal letter saying you're under the management's contract and you're under the record company's contract and all legal, and you can't be part of their war because you're under contract in a foreign country. And I'm so sorry about that. And so I get back to America, man. And that didn't go over all.
Yeah.
In the garbage. You're in.
In the
What are we
track.
doing here? Going to war, boy. Why exactly? So your grandma doesn't get raped. Jesus Christ. I had a guy in the army tell me, "You just gonna stand there while some Viet Cong rapes your mama, boy?" I'm like, I am dealing with the dumbest people in the world here. 10,000 miles away, there's a Viet Cong, and I'm supposed to
Yeah.
go kill him because he's going to rape my mother? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And even these days they do. They get people to believe
Yeah.
the stupidest
Right.
ass stuff on
Right.
both
How
sides.
they can make that connection is beyond me. Yeah.
Or even that the stuff that they come up with is that they come up with stuff that just doesn't matter.
Right.
It just
Right.
doesn't matter. It's just like, remember a few years ago there was this guy, this Saudi guy that was the guy that was killed in the Saudi embassy.
Oh
And,
yes, 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 yes.
they all made a big story. Oh my God, this guy Khashoggi, oh my God. And I'm thinking, you moron, who gives a flat flying fuck what a Saudi does to a Saudi in his own place? And you're the only reason it's even a story is because you're saying so.
Right, right,
No, I don't
exactly.
give a fuck about it, and not
Yeah,
even the littlest, because there's nothing I can do about it, and except get upset. And why should I even give a shit?
right,
And so
right,
the media is telling me to believe some bullshit that doesn't even matter. And
right.
I'm like, I'm like,
Amen.
son people are believing this, but I ain't one of them, you know.
Yeah, I know that, and that
That's why I'm
misinformation,
still alive. That's why
and
I'm still alive.
that misinformation and disinformation is getting worse and worse. Yeah, yeah, all the time. Well,
Yep.
post misunderstood. I know Glenn played in Juicy
It
Lucy.
wasn't even misinformation and disinformation. It was just information that
Yeah,
didn't matter, you know.
right.
It wasn't even a question of wrong or right. It wasn't that it wasn't true. Just it
Yeah,
doesn't fucking matter. Except you're telling me that
right.
matters. I don't give a fuck what you tell me. You know.
Right. Exactly. Well, after the misunderstood, I know Glenn played in Juicy Lucy
Right.
with a little bit of success, and then I know Tony joined the band High Tide. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. What about Rick Moe?
Rick Mo went back to the States and just became a straight guy. You know.
Okay, okay. All right.
And same with Greg, straight guy. You know.
All right. Didn't get involved
Became
in
a
music.
normie. Became a normie.
Okay, okay. Well, take us
Normie,
on.
normies, those who believe all the bullshit that they hear in the media. You know.
Yes, that's right. I've heard that word. Well, take us on your journey afterwards.
They went so that, I ended up 12 years as a fugitive, 12 years, you know. And some of those years I didn't even have a passport, or to speak of
Yeah.
a false passport, you know.
Right.
So I never had a passport the whole 12 years, and I had to sneak in through Mexico after 12 years to get back, you know.
Yeah.
And then I had to get go back to the army and get a discharge and go to court and, you know, get sentenced. I didn't get to go to jail or anything, but I had to do 600 hours of public service for the passport thing. That was I didn't want anything to do with this passport stuff. I don't want anything to do with this army. I don't even understand why we're talking about this Vietnam bullshit, you know? I mean, today, nobody wants to talk about it now. You know, nobody wants to talk. I could ask my sisters, hey man, remember the Pentagon Papers? They have no fucking clue what it even was.
They don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, exactly.
And so and they're still doing all that, exactly what they did in Vietnam. They're doing it all. They're just doing it. The whole of Ukraine is just another Vietnam, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think it's pathetic. I think America should be locked up as a country. That's what I think.
Right. But let me get out
I think
first.
I think they're a rogue nation, you know.
Oh,
Like
yes,
I'm living in Thailand. They don't bother anybody. They don't bother anybody.
Right.
They bother people? Why should they? You know?
Right. Well, before that, let me escape first. Let me get out of here first before. Well, how did you end up in India? Talk about that.
Well, when I was in Haight-Ashbury, I met some spiritual people that were starting this Maha Mantra, this Hindu chanting. And so I met some people and said, you're going to go to the Hindu chants. And so in the morning, I went to the Golden Gate Park and there was a bunch of hippies chanting the Hindu chant, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And so I met these people and I started reading the books and I started being interested in the philosophy because I was already looking for the answer, you know, through the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And so here's this really interesting Bhagavad Gita and all this stuff. And so then I met the guru who was on his way back to India. He was an old 80-year-old Swami. At that time, he was 70. And he was an amazing person. And I got initiated by him. And then he told me to go to India and join him in Vrindavan, which is this holy place where Krishna was born 5,000 years ago. I mean, historically, and which is the land of 5,000 temples. And had never been a Westerner there ever. That was the first time. And so he told me to go there. So by the time I get there, because I went by UK and staying with John Peel and Jeff Beck and all this crazy stuff. And so by the time I got there, he was gone. And there was nothing there because his movement or the thing that became big about his preaching didn't exist at that time. It just, he gone back to America to make it happen. And I was like, and so I ended up staying with one of his god brothers, which is another monk who they both shared the same guru. And so I ended up staying with him. And that was a real Orthodox. That wasn't a Western style nonsense. That was a real Orthodox thing where nobody had any idea who the Beatles were. Nobody had any idea what rock and roll was, you know. I was living with a bunch of sadhus. They're called sadhus, they're holy men that have renounced the world. They're not living in this ashram because they're poor. They're poor because they're living in this ashram. You know?
There you go. Right.
They want me. Why don't they get a nicer bed? If you brought them a nicer bed, they wouldn't use it, you know.
Right.
They're not there to be comfortable, you know.
Right. It's sad, you know, that Westerners trying to force their expectations and will on those people, you know, like you said. And well, you know, you could have nicer things. You could have bigger.
It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Right. It's not going to. No, it's not.
Like I just heard, like Uganda. America said, "Hey man, you guys got to push this gay thing," and all. Guys, hey man, thousands of years we don't accept
Right.
that.
Right.
And
Exactly.
you do your thing, and we'll do our thing, and we don't complain about you, and you don't complain about us. Uganda's like, God, all it takes is an intelligent Uganda to tell an American to shut the hell up. And
Right.
so America, okay, we're gonna they canceled visas and they kicked out the diplomats and they wouldn't do any business and the banking system was turned off. All this on Uganda because of this one thing that
Right.
has no relevance to it's not unnecessarily irrelevant.
Right. Right. It is totally.
Gay rights is irrelevant. It's like
Yeah.
who said they don't have rights? I mean, they got the same rights as me. I mean, I got human rights. Where they get
Yeah.
extra rights or something? That's what. So so
Yeah.
so, so
It's
I'm
lit.
like, so
It's
when
literally.
I lived in the States for until '86.
Uh-huh.
After I became a gemologist and everything, and I thought, man,
Yeah.
I just couldn't deal with these people. Everybody's flipping each other off. I've never
Yeah.
seen anybody eat the bird since I've been over here. Nobody even
Oh,
knows.
okay.
People
Right.
don't do that. They don't have that rude and insulting and argumentative and conflict. Everybody's trying to get everybody. It just doesn't happen over here. Unless
Right.
it's organized, like it was back when they had the red shirt Civil
Yeah.
War. Like
Yeah.
that was organized. That was paid for by the NED, the AID, the American. They're funding all this stuff. It's unbelievable. Openly, it's not even a secret.
Right. Right. When you were,
I was here. I was here when I was in. I know people in the government. I was seeing what was happening. They were
yeah.
they find an opposition group in a country where they want to get some power, and they
Right.
find somebody who's dissatisfied, and then they start funding them. And you get this
Right.
American AID. This is American National Endowment for Democracy. What are they doing in Thailand, funding the people trying to overthrow the
Exactly.
king?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, they should be hung. It's like ridiculous.
Right.
And
Right.
I went through 10 years of the Civil War because of that. So
Exactly.
I hate their guts. These aid organizations are absolute scumbag, just ridiculous. And I just know for a fact, that all
Right.
these even to this day, they were
Right.
funded by them.
Right.
And
They're and what under the pretense of doing good. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
their job is they're rent-a-mob,
Right.
incorporated.
Yeah. Right.
Rent-a-mob incorporated, and they take a picture from an angle and say, "Oh my God, the whole country's against this guy." You
Yeah.
know,
Right.
and
Right. Well, how long were you in India? How long were you in India?
12 years.
Oh,
Well,
12 years. You did
I
say,
was in India for 6 years without
okay.
leaving.
Okay.
And then I had to go to Nepal
Okay.
because I caught up with me. And
Okay.
then I went to Nepal. Then from Nepal, I went back to India. And from
Okay.
India back to Nepal. Then from Nepal, I went to Bali or to Bangkok. Then from Bangkok to Bali and Bali, Bangkok, and then Nepal. And a little bit back and forth.
You're moving.
All the time on a passport, false
Uh,
passports with other people's pictures and stuff.
yeah.
And have
Yeah.
every single time I happened to pass anywhere, I had a terrifying experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
A passport
Wow.
with somebody else's picture. I mean, think how how fun that is.
Yes. Well, when you were in India, you didn't happen to run into David Laflame, did you? It's a beautiful day. The band. It's a beautiful day
Yeah. Mhm.
from the West Coast too. Yeah, I did an interview with one guy a long time
I
ago.
didn't see any Westerners.
Okay.
When I
Well,
was in India, I was in Brindavan the first 6 years. I
right,
didn't see any.
right.
If I saw a Westerner, oh my God, they're the
Yeah,
enemy.
right,
Who's
right.
after
Yeah,
me? Who's after
yeah,
me? Is India
yeah,
after me? No. Is
yeah.
Russia after me? No. America's after me. And what
Yeah.
did I do
Well,
wrong? I wouldn't kill people in Vietnam. Are you kidding?
yeah. I know David was searching because he was over there. I talked to one guy, it's been a long time ago, and he went to India and he was sitting by one of it might have been the Ganges. I don't know if it was the actual Ganges or another river. And this guy next to him started talking to him. He said, he's an American too. And it turned out to be David. It turned out to be. So I thought that was really interesting, that he was searching as well. Yeah, over
Well, I
there.
wasn't searching. I
Yeah.
was like, for me, the only way out was in. I had
Uh-huh.
found a spiritual path that got
Yeah.
me out of this world, and being
Yeah.
in this world was the problem, not the US government.
Right.
Being in this world was the problem. Being identified with this world was the problem. And so I was in a spiritual place with all these spiritual people. They all had the same motive to get out of this cycle of birth and death. And the only way out was in, because there was no way I could get out on the outside. It was just like a big America. Everything was like back to hell. If they
Right.
caught me. And they're going to catch you. When you're a fugitive, they're going to for sure catch you, eventually. And you never know when. And every single day you have that word. You go to sleep at night without any foundation. Like have you ever been in a situation where you had no foundation? You go to sleep at night, you don't have a country, you don't have a freedom, you don't have a family, you don't have any safety, you're on the run. you know, and you didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. What the hell am I on the run for? You know, all I wanted to do is be a singer.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I think most viewers can't fathom that.
I hate America for that. You know, I absolutely despise that. You know? Not because of the band. I hate what happened to me. I lost the band. Well, that's nothing compared to millions of Vietnamese
Yeah.
that have poisoned all this Agent Orange, all this crap. You know,
Right.
so I'm anti-war. I'm totally anti-war. You know, so
Oh,
anybody
oh.
who's war in any way. The only thing that makes any sense is diplomacy in any situation. You know, war is like diplomacy goes to hell. There's nothing left but war. And if you're at war, you're a savage. You know.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. We'll talk about what's involved in becoming a Vedantist.
Well, there's different kinds of Vedanta, and that's pretty complicated thing. Vedanta is based on the Vedas, which means it's a Sanskrit word meaning.
Well, in your case, what did you do?
Well, I got initiated into a Vaishnava sampradaya. A sampradaya is a sect, you know, a lineage that goes back ancient times, and there's different lineages of and there's different kinds of philosophies. The two basic philosophies are dualism and monism, and they're both talking about the same thing because they're on the level of the spirit, not on the level of matter. So when people say monism, they say, okay, that doesn't mean there's no matter. Yeah, okay, there's no matter, but so dualism and monism are the two things where, you know, monism says that the soul, like you're the soul, and God, the super soul, is just a big nothing, and we become one with it, and then we become it. We become it, and that's the end of all the problems. And another group says, no, even in a spiritual existence, we are separate. You know, like a ray of the sun is never the sun, even though it's consisting of sun, of light, heat, and all the things that, even though a ray of the sun consists of sun 100%, it is not the sun. And if it gets into a shadow, the sun is not in a shadow. And so they're different and non-different. That's what's called different and non-different, simultaneous difference and non-difference. So I belong to this ancient sect that went back to, you know, 15th century Bengal and further back to Brindavan, and where God is worshipped as Vishnu, and it's called Vaishnavas. And God's a person, and he's also a non-person. And you could say the opposite of God is nothing. Okay, well, so he's also nothing. But who wants, if you've got to choose between something and nothing, which is going to be, you know?
Yeah, yes.
So anyway, so I was living in this ashram with these people with Sanskrit books. I learned Sanskrit. I spoke Hindi, Bengali. Was living with all these people. Nobody spoke. Everybody treated me the first year I was there. I was an untouchable. And why was I untouchable? Because I was a mlecha. And a lot of these guys in the ashram had never met a mlecha. A mlecha is a barbarian, a Western barbarian who beef-eating family, came from a beef-eating family, you know, which is to them is that's even more unthinkable than for us what a cannibal would be, you know. But if you meet somebody, they're a vegetarian, but they used to be a cannibal. You'd be like, "How you're a vegetarian?" Yeah, but I used to be a cannibal. How could you ever have been in that position? So these guys are looking at me. How did you used to be a beef eater? Well, I'm a vegetarian. Okay, you're a vegetarian. But I mean, you what? That means you have no knowledge at all. If you come from a Western family, you might know money and this and that, but you don't know anything about spirit. Nothing. Right. You have to remember the Gita. You have no idea what is the Upanishads. You have no idea what's Vedanta Sutra. You just don't know anything. You're just a moron. And because I accepted that, I could make some advancement.
You know? Yes. I dabbled a little in the Upanishads. I did read a little bit of that a few years ago. So I was always trying to, you know, take in more and more, you know, spiritual readings and things like that. So
there's basically three different schools of thought in India, you know, that of the religious. First is in the Vedanta. First is Advaitavad, which is Advaita Vedanta, which is you know, the impersonalism. Yes. And then there's the personalism, which is called Dvaita Vedanta, dualism Vedanta, and that's all the schools of Vaishnavism. And then you've got yoga, which is called Yoga Vedanta, and that's where, you know, God is meditated upon as a tiny little thumb-sized thing in your heart, you know. And so each one of these has the same goal: to get out of the cycle of birth and death, and to get into blissful position. And blissful meaning is you're not suffering cycle of birth and death. You're not suffering birth, death, old age, and disease, you know. And they've got all divided up, and they've got, you know, knowledge and creation, and they've got what is suffering and how is suffering, and what kinds of suffering are there, and what are the elements involved, what are the subtle elements involved, what's the physical body? So they have all this knowledge they've had from thousands of years, And I'm like, man, I discovered a treasure, But it's not a treasure worth money. It's a treasure worth salvation. And so that's in this ashram with all these sadhus who had no interest in the material world or money.
Right. Yes, exactly.
You told them about politics, they just laugh in your face. And man, you're just a fool, That's what they would say. You're just an idiot. What are you thinking about? What are you talking about? Who gives a crap about?
Yeah, we're way too materialistic over here. Yeah.
Oh, but it's not just that, but they've never suffered. Americans have never suffered. And I'm like, man, they just like all my sisters, they never have suffered,
Right.
And they've never been in it. They've never lost their freedom. They've never lost anything. They're just boring people, And I love them, but I mean, they haven't got a clue where I'm coming from,
Right.
They haven't a clue what I've been through. They have no idea that their brother has seen amazing things, met amazing people, learned amazing information, They have no idea. They just can't. Whatever they can think I've been through is whatever they can imagine, which is not very, not very. Yes. They've never seen what I saw. They don't even know what to relate to.
Right. And
we have then you have a different perspective on the people who are taking away your freedom.
Right.
If I did something wrong, if I was a criminal, if I did something wrong, I would feel guilty about it. Okay, I'm lost, but I didn't do anything wrong.
No reason to feel guilty.
The Vietnam War was absolutely preposterous. Everybody can look back now and say, yeah, it's absolutely preposterous. Right. And anybody who doesn't think so can go back and do a little review of what exactly was the Pentagon Papers.
Right. Exactly. Well, you when and how did you find the ruby mine?
I didn't find it. I was in Nepal and I was at and I got a telegram in the weirdest way from one of my friends named Sham Shunder, he's an American guy that got involved with the Beatles and everything. And he had a family in Hyderabad that had a ruby mine. It was not gem quality rubies, but it was not junk, It was like it would be, instead of being opaque, or instead of being transparent, these were translucent.
Okay.
So they weren't valuable rubies, but they weren't nothing. And so these are the kind of rubies that would sell for $10 a carat, or or $1 a carat for the rough stones. So he had this. He said, come down there and help me get this together. And he had gotten this guy George Harrison and this guy Peter Sellers to invest some money in this, and he was trying to figure out how to set up a cutting factory in Bangkok. And he wants me to go to Bangkok, and I'm like, man, what are you even talking about? I don't even have a passport. Where the hell's Bangkok? Thailand. Where's Thailand? Man, I just came from living with a bunch of cavemen,
Yeah.
You're talking about Thailand? So I have no idea what he's talking about. So I don't have a passport. I have no money. So anyway, it's just a big. So I ended up, he gave me 5 kilos of rubies and said, okay, we'll try to sell these and get a passport in Bombay. So I went to Bombay and somehow I met somebody and sold 5 kilos of these for $25,000. And I'd never seen money in my entire life. And all of a sudden, and then I get this passport from the black market there, just crazy stuff. And back to Nepal and then to Thailand and set up a cutting factory. And I didn't know anything about anything,
Yeah. And that was what year? Around what year was that?
74.
74. Okay, 74. Okay. Wow. Yeah, very, very interesting. You mentioned George Harrison and Peter Sellers. Yeah. Yes, very interesting. Well, when was the move to Bangkok? When did you move to?
86.
Okay.
86.
Okay.
Yeah.
86. Okay.
I told my dad, I said, I cannot live in this kind of mundane society where everybody's so stupid.
Yeah.
With no spiritual knowledge, and nobody even respects spiritual knowledge. Right. Even somebody had spiritual knowledge, they, that guy is he's a priest or religious, or he's just man, like nobody had. If you want to be great, you got to be a famous movie star with your ass hanging out.
Yeah,
you're right. No respect for that. I have zero respect for that.
You're right.
Now I'll recognize a good pretender for their talent, but I'm sure not going to take them seriously as somebody to look up to.
Right. No.
America has nothing else to look up to. It has nothing else to look up to.
Okay. And you had to.
Remember the guy from Zappa? He said politics is show business for ugly people. Politics is show business for ugly people.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Really good, but
Yeah. That makes, yeah.
he also
Think
said
about,
Hollywood is the entertainment division of the military industrial complex.
oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. That is good. Yeah.
Good.
He had some insight there. Yes, he did. Yes, he
Yeah, he
did.
was, but he was, yeah, yeah. If things have gotten so mixed up now, you don't even know which side is what. Because I remember in the old days, man, this guy, what's his name? Who was vice president? This warmonger pig,
Uh,
his name. He was vice president. Was Bush? What's his name?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Bush. Yeah.
And
George
he
Bush.
had a vice president. He had a vice president. Bush did.
Oh. Oh, yeah. 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 What was his name?
Cheney.
Oh, Cheney. Cheney. Okay,
There's
Cheney.
Cheney, and there's all these neocon warmongers
Right.
and
Right.
all these absolute scumbag pigs. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I'm at last year. I'm like, these guys are all over here.
Right.
What the hell
Right.
happened to the world?
Yeah.
You
Yes.
got really good people. They're all over here. Like, oh man, this is crazy. Hard to even
Right.
tell us. So I like.
It's
I
real.
don't even. I'm a Thai citizen now. I
Yeah.
think it's just none of it. I've never voted in an American election. I never will. I can vote in a Thai election.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Well, you actually got a degree, right? As a gemologist.
Yeah, in
Okay.
'83.
Okay. Okay. All right. How
Yeah,
involved was that? How involved was that to get a degree?
oh, it's involved. To become a gemologist, you got to pass the diamond exams, you got to pass the color stone exam, the gem identification exam, the 20 stone exam, takes years.
Okay. Okay. And then became the designer at Astral Gemstone Talismans. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
First, I became
You're,
a gemologist. I was getting investment quality gems for wealthy clients who were looking for a hedge against inflation. Because when I first went back to America, everybody was there was this word inflation. What did it mean exactly? It meant that if you wanted to get gas, you had to get in a line for 2 blocks long and wait
oh, yeah.
on your day, you're on the opposite day. I said, God, this is a loony bin, man.
Right.
What happened? I could go to India and I don't have to see this.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember those days. I was young, but I remember those days. Yeah. The
And
gas
so
lines. Yeah.
yeah, everybody's honking and being pissed off and fuck you.
Yeah.
You got to put on the television, and it's just mania. It's like
Right.
1 second they're showing you some hideous food that's just going to make you kill you screw you up your health. Next
Right.
minute they're showing you some idiotic medicine that's going to counteract it. Next
Yeah.
minute they're showing you hideous nonsense. It's like God, the fact that there's TV shows like this even
Yeah.
exist is insulting to my intelligence. That
Right.
there's could be humans in this world that would even watch that. And
Right.
I go with my sister. They're all laughing at this stuff, and I mean they're watching these TV shows like what's it called? There used to be a comedy where the Big Bang, and they're
Oh,
laughing.
Big Bang Theory. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
These ads are on there and I'm like, this is the loony bin, man.
Right.
I'm not saying that Thailand doesn't have stupid ass stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm
Yeah.
never watching it over here, and here this is what they actually watch. Is they actually watch this garbage.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It
Including,
is.
including, it's the only country in the world where you can put ads like that on TV of medicine.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Counteract this, take
It,
this, counteract it with this.
yeah.
God, why do we not take it and not counteract it? Why do we just not do? No, there's no money in not doing it.
See, that's the point. You did it. Yeah. The bottom line. Bottom line. Exactly.
No money in health. There's no money in peace.
Yeah. Right. Right. Exactly. That's the thing. That's what motivates. That's what motivates most people.
That was the misunderstood. Like when I remember hearing, the Yardbirds and they had, Mr. You're a better man than I.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
That was like a really early. Well, I wouldn't even say social justice. It was like anti-war. It was really
Right.
anti-war because so that became, and then I get drafted. It's like anti-war, man. It's like I was like the war is the craziest thing imaginable. If you got a war going on, you really screwed up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, speaking of back to the misunderstood, uh, the file that you sent me, I Unseen, the Misunderstood, written by you, and this is interesting, Mike Stacks.
Well,
Now he's the writer with
oh,
Ugly Things, right?
the
Ugly
book,
Things.
you mean?
Yeah, the
The
book.
book.
Yeah, yeah. Mike Stacks, Ugly Things. Yeah.
Was it a book or script?
This was a adaptation for a movie, a screenplay.
Okay,
like
that's a script. That's a script. That's a script.
Yeah, screenplay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Has that been developed anymore? Is there, okay.
There was a time back in 2001 when we had something going on, but it never developed because those things rarely do. You know?
All right. Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
At that time I cared about it, and now I could care less, but
Okay.
there are people still talking about it, and I'm like, yeah, great.
Well, that Mike Stacks.
Let me know when it's on, man. Let me know when it plays on.
Right. His name came up. I have an interview tomorrow with the guy, and Mike Stacks had done an interview with his Ugly Things with this musician a few years ago, I guess it's been now. So I thought when he mentioned Mike Stacks, I said, that rings a bell. I said, I'm going to talk to Rick Brown about,
Mike
his
Stacks,
name.
my bro, man.
Yeah. Well, I heard.
He's the biggest fan of the Misunderstood after
Yeah.
John. But he's the biggest fan of the Pretty Things than anyone in the world.
Yeah.
I personally could give a crap about the Pretty Things, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did like Viv Prince. I look back at their music and oh God.
Yeah.
Compared to American, it's pretty good, but I mean,
yeah.
It's pretty funky. But I mean, Viv Prince was a character, absolutely a character.
A character. Well, the book based on the script, like Misunderstood, was published in 2007. That did come out, and then a novel based on the book, Eye Unseen. Paul Swainson wrote it in 2012.
He hasn't got it published either.
Oh, he hasn't. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Wow.
So, and I'm not even trying. I'm not trying to get it published for him.
Yeah.
I've heard my story so many times that you couldn't find somebody that would at least like to hear it.
Yeah.
Even my son, it's like, you want to hear one of my stories? Oh man, please.
Is that right? Well,
no, that's not like.
No, he's good about that. Well, I'm glad you just took the time and you're open.
And he comes from a different generation. He comes from the Gen and Z,
Yeah.
So Gen Z, they don't believe a word of anything. Right. They definitely don't believe the media. They definitely don't believe, and their attitude is, let me know when something changes and I'll adjust my life.
Yeah. Right.
I don't give a crap to hear this. This is happening and that's happening. It's bad. It's like watching a tennis game. Yes, no, yes, no. Let me know when something changes and I'll adjust my life. Meanwhile, screw it. I'm doing my thing,
Right.
And that's the Gen Z attitude. Like,
it is a good way to put it. Well, I'm just glad.
Don't make up your mind about anything spiritual or religious until you've done some study, because there's nothing worse than arrogant ignorance.
Right. Yes, that's a good way to put it. I like that too. Well, Rick, it's been enjoyable. I'm just glad you took the time to meet with me and to visit. Anytime. Yeah, and share some of your stories. And again, all the best to you.
Good.
All right, Rick. All right. Well, again, yes, peace to you, and we'll be in touch. Stay in touch, and again, I'll send this out to you a week or so, and see what kind of mileage we can get with it. Bye for now. All right.
Stay cool.